Good afternoon, everybody. MG here, MGCovers, bringing you a brand new sports handicapping video. Title of this video is recapping our recent 9-3 run in Major League Baseball. Super excited to bring in this video. I think you're going to learn a lot. There is a ton of teaching points in this video, so it's going to be a long video. Before we do that, as always, if this is your first time watching one of my videos, greatly appreciate you subscribing to the channel. Have a lot of playlists on Major League Baseball, which is going on right now. We have football just around the corner. A ton of content on football to help you improve your handicapping. If you want to follow me on social media, I am MGCovers, covers spelled with a Z. Give out a ton of content on Instagram, so you get a lot of value simply by following me. So, that being said, let's dive into Major League Baseball. Those of you that have followed me for a long period of time, baseball has really been a difficult sport for me the last couple years, even going into this year. I had a model that I, quote, thought would work based on the play against concept. It didn't, so I changed it, and having a ton of success with this model that I currently have. And this is really a continuation of the previous video. I may put a link in that. So if you haven't watched that, it's the last video. Talks about variance. So quickly, just to show you this, these are our last 12 plays. So we've gone 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a run. We cashed 2 last night, 3 losses there, and prior to that was 4 wins. So a really solid run, not by accident. And I'm going to basically show you how I'm handicapping. So a quick review. We generally have about 5 plays via my model that have value, which you see. This is my model from yesterday, which is June the 13th. And then from that, what I like to do is play right at about 2 plays. So that takes the variance out. What I mean by that is the worst that can happen is we go 0-2. So it allows me to cherry pick to get the, quote, best 2 plays. And I really like this way of handicapping. Had a lot of success with it. So that being said, let's dive right into what I call my first cut play. So what I do, this is my model over here on the left. So what I'm looking for is value between my line and the sportsbook line. So the first game was Atlanta. Atlanta was minus 145. My line was minus 155. So not a ton of value, but a little bit. And considering Atlanta was the away team, I gave consideration to the run line on that particular play. So that play had value. The next game, you look here, Baltimore, Toronto. Of course, Toronto, we had both teams as favorites via my line. Baltimore was getting plus 252, so we have value with Baltimore. Next, Chicago White Sox, we had them at plus 150. We had Detroit at minus 125, so we're getting some value with Detroit. We had Texas at minus 122. We had Houston at plus 133. Like the Dodgers, Houston way overvalued right now. My line was minus 122 Texas. Texas was plus 140. We scroll down here, Kansas City, San Fran. We had both them as favorites via my line. Kansas was plus 161. And Minnesota, Seattle, we had Minnesota as the favorite at minus 125. Seattle as the dog at plus 130. And Minnesota was the underdog at plus 100. Now, the favorites concept, to briefly explain this is a good teaching point. Favorites in Major League Baseball win 60% of the time. So you have to incorporate favorites. One mistake I've made early in the season. So you have to play favorites. Not all the time, but you have to incorporate favorites into your handicapping because that statistical occurrence happens 60% of the time in Major League Baseball. So what I came up with was this favorite concept, which means if considering favorites win 60% of the time, if that team is a favorite via my line, there is a strong possibility that team's probably going to win. So you have 2 things immediately going in your favor. Favorite via my line, favorite via the sportsbook line. So strong probability that team will win. San Diego was minus 130, my line. Sportsbook was minus 135. Now, you don't have traditional value that I teach, like the Minnesota game, right? Minnesota was minus 125. They were getting plus 100, so there's value there. But again, the favorite concept is more of a, quote, concept play. And, of course, Arizona was minus 122. and minus 144, 145 at the book. So what I do with this is I'm not going to handicap all of these games. I'm going to handicap the games listed here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What's that? 8? I'm sorry, I can't count. Yeah, 8 games. So what I'm looking to do is I want to get the two best plays. Rather than just play all of these, I'm going to handicap this down and try to find my 2 best plays. So the first game I'm looking at immediately is Atlanta here. Now, Atlanta had, this is the results from the game, but I'm going to try to show you how I'm looking at this game. There's my line, minus 155, while I was handicapped. I wish I would have made a video last night while I was handicapping these games here. And let's see if it pulls up the box score. Okay, so Atlanta had Anderson on the mound. And so what I do, I am looking at pitching. And again, remember this model. This model incorporates everything. It incorporates hitting, pitching, relief pitching. So we already know we have Atlanta's the favorite. Anderson was on the mound. I will check this out as well. Now, this was the game that he actually pitched right here, 6-13. So what I do for pitchers, this is very important, last 3 starts. That's all you need to know. Don't look at year-to-date. I like the last 3 starts. And if you look at these last 3, he gave up 2, 5, and 4. So we know going into this what's going to happen. He's probably going to give up some runs, right? So, in fact, you look at the actual game, he gave up 4. Now, what we knew about Washington going into this game last night was it was a bullpen game, right? So you got a really solid Atlanta team, a team that had won 10 straight, and Washington was coming out the gate with basically what we call a bullpen game. So I would say as far as pitching goes, there really was an advantage, maybe a slight advantage for Atlanta there, considering they will be able to face that bullpen right out the gate. And you can see Atlanta scored 3 and 3 runs the second and third inning. But going back to how I looked at this game, I really liked that game, right? So let's take a look at the Baltimore one. We had value there. And this is real important here because this was one I immediately scratched from the beginning. So if we look at Baltimore's starting pitcher, let's look at his last 3 starts here. Okay, this was the game in question here. Prior to that, he'd given up 2, 2, and 6, right? So strong possibility he was going to give up some runs as well. We go over here and look at Toronto starting pitcher. Basically their ace on the mound. And he had given up 0, 3, and 2. And look prior to that, 1, 1, 2, 1. So their ace was on the mound. You already have a huge pitching advantage for Toronto. So that was a game just based on that. I immediately scratched it because what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get the best possible play. So if you look at those 2 games and compare them, which would have been the better play just between those 2, playing Atlanta or playing Baltimore? Playing Atlanta, right? So I immediately scratched Baltimore for that game. So the next one in question was Detroit. And I'll show you my logic behind that one. If we can get to this here. Okay, now Detroit, again, so we had White Sox were plus 150, so we're getting a lot of value there with Detroit. However, the White Sox were starting, it was Lynn was starting for White Sox. It was his first game of the year. So you knew he was going to give up some runs, but then you didn't know. Maybe he pitched to Jim because it was the first time Detroit was facing him. So when you have no stats available for somebody, those are games that I like to pass on. Does that make sense? So we don't have any stats on him, so we don't know. I mean, he could pitch really well. He could pitch really poor. Who knows? So in games like that, I simply like to pass. So that was the reason why I didn't really give much consideration to that one. Okay, so let's go back to here. So now it takes us to Texas and Houston. Let's look at their so Texas is playing really well. I think this is a really good example of a Texas team. I'm pretty sure they have a losing record, right? But so what happens here is, even though they're favorites via my line, they have a losing record, so they're extremely undervalued in the marketplace. Same with Houston. Houston has a winning record, but they were dogs via my line, so they're going to be overvalued. And this is a prime example. You've seen this with the Dodgers in the last 10 games. They've been favored every single game, last 10 games, but I think they've lost 6 of the last 10. So we take a look at starting pitching for Texas and Houston in this one. Okay, Houston, Javier here. You look at his last 3 starts, pitched well. He'd given up, had a bad outing against Houston prior to that. He'd only given up 1 and 0, so 5, 1 and 0. Probably going to give up some runs, but, you know, that's pretty good starting pitching, right? So let's take a look at Detroit here. Okay, there we go. I'm sorry, Texas. Texas had Hearn on the mound. And you look at his last 3 starts. This is a great example of understanding stats. So this was the game that was actually played. But you look at his prior 3 starts, he'd given up 3, 3, and 2. And then look what he gave up in the actual game was 3. So how I evaluated this was relatively neutral, which means I wouldn't really say that Houston had an advantage pitching, nor would I say Texas had an advantage pitching. So this was relatively neutral. All right, and then, so that one I kind of made to the second round, right? And so if you were looking at comparing the Detroit game between the Baltimore game, which would you say would be the better game, better play? It would be Detroit, in my opinion, because Baltimore, Toronto, you had a good pitcher, Toronto, a bad pitcher, whereas White Sox and Detroit, it was relatively neutral, all right? So the next game we're going to look at is the Kansas City game. We'll scroll down here. Kansas City, San Francisco. In this particular game, we have both teams as a favorite. Kansas City starting pitcher here. He'd given up 3, 7, and 3 in his last 3 starts. So what does that mean? He's going to give up some runs. No doubt about it. And he gave up 2. Pitched pretty decent, but very close to his average. Whereas you see the prior 3 starts, look at this. He'd given up 0, 0, and 0. But that we don't focus on that. We focus on the most recent. And like I've said so many times on this channel, the best indication of future performance is most recent performance, right? So if you look at these last 3 starts, he'd given up some runs, and that's exactly what happened in this particular game. So we look at San Francisco starting pitcher here. He had given up 1, 2, and 3. So definitely give a little bit of edge to San Francisco pitching-wise in this matchup. And then finally, we look at Minnesota. Minnesota and Seattle here. Whoops, I meant to look at box score. Okay, let's look at Minnesota. And I'm showing you these stats like I was handicapping this game. So you can see here, that was a game in question. The prior starts were 1, 1, and 3. So huge pitching advantage there. He'd only given up 1, 1, and 3. So that's good. Let's take a look at Seattle's pitcher. He'd given up 2, 3, and 1. So again, the way I would evaluate that would be both pitchers were really good, right? So no advantage there. Okay, and then San Diego and Arizona. I really liked, just for time's sake, we're going to scratch Arizona and just focus on that San Diego game. So we look at San Diego. Again, that was a favorite concept, meaning they were favorite via my line, favorite at the books. And let's scroll over here. And San Diego had their ace on the mound, Darvish. And last 3 starts had given up 0, 5, and 2. Had a rough outing there versus St. Louis. So he was in good form. 0, 5, and 2 earned runs are really good. And let's take a look at the Cubs. I think they had a pitching change last minute. All right. Okay, their guy had given up their start at 1, 3, and 7. So more than likely he was going to give up some runs. His form was closer to that one, only gave up 1 run, but definitely like the advantage there for the Cubs. So based on that, if you look at this next screen, sorry about this chicken scratch. I wrote it down. This is how I wrote it down. These are the teams that I took to the next round. So I took all of my first cut plays, which was 8, and then I narrowed it down to 4. So I liked Atlanta run line. I like Detroit. I like Texas. I like San Diego. Of course, Atlanta was in really good form. They had won 10. Detroit, relatively neutral. Pitching matchups, we didn't know what was going to happen with Lynn, but I still carried it over because we were getting dog money. And then, of course, Texas, that seemed like a neutral pitching matchup. And then, of course, San Diego. So from these plays, I wanted to narrow it down to 2. So what I ended up playing was, all right, let's go back and look. I'm going to show you line movement too. And line movement, the way I'm handicapping these games, I'm looking at line movement just like I'm looking at anything else. I don't overreact to it. It's just something that I'm going to always look at and consider. Now, if you're a client, I actually will show you the resource and the site that I use for line movement. I'm just doing it straight from whatever book's going to pull up here. Okay, so you look at the Atlanta line movement. I always like to look at the line movement the day of, which is right here, 155. It goes down 145, and this is pretty much true for all the books. So what I call neutral line movement. It wasn't for Atlanta, nor was it against Atlanta. So I actually like that. And again, going back to the concept of favorites win 60% of the time, I ended up playing Atlanta and actually played them on the run line. I actually got it at plus 107 playing them on the run line. Now, real important here too. So I don't play home teams on the run line simply because they're not guaranteed 9 at bats. If you play an away team, you're going to be guaranteed 9 at bats, which is going to increase your chances. It's just a smart strategy to adopt. Don't ever play home teams on the run line because you're not guaranteed 9 at bats. And over a long haul, that property will work in your favor. And I'm going to show you, if you go back and look at the last 12 plays, I played a lot of run lines. Played Atlanta here, they won. Toronto here, they won. Had a loss with the Yankees, a win with the Yankees, a win with Toronto, and then a win with Atlanta. So run line is it's a very good tool to use because that team's guaranteed 9 at bats. Really good strategy there, and it saves you some juice from playing it straight on the money line. Okay, what I wanted to do is go back and look at that Cubs game here, line movement for the Cubs and San Diego. All right, and again, I would say this is relatively neutral line movement as well, depending on the book. Let's see if I can find another book down here. All right, let's look at Unibet's action. It started Monday. It opened up at 130. It moved a good bit. Went down to 129, back up to 130, 134, back down to 129. So again, that's relatively neutral line movement. Sometimes you'll get line movement where it moves in your favor, meaning like if the line was minus 130 and it closed at like say 145. When I consider line movement an advantage is when it moves about 15 cents in your favor. And I'm going to go back and look at this Minnesota game because I think this may have been a miss on my part. But anyway, just to sort of summarize, ended up playing Atlanta, San Diego. Both of those teams won. And if you go back from this original cut, Atlanta won, Texas won, and San Diego won. Detroit lost. And if you go all the way back from the original first cut here, Atlanta won, Texas won, Minnesota won. So 3 out of 6 from the plays with value. And then, of course, from the favorites concept, San Diego won, Arizona lost. So it's a really, really, really good model. Again, I don't recommend handicapping this way. I like the way that I handicap. So what I'm trying to do is once I see a good play, I compare the next game to that play. Is it better? And in my opinion, based on what I've showed you so far, I thought that Atlanta and San Diego were the best plays. Probably could have made a case for Texas, could have made a case for Minnesota. I want to go back and look at this line movement briefly for Minnesota. Yeah, you can see it did bump just slightly in favor of, well, I'll take that back. Depending on the book, let's look at Unibet here. So, relatively neutral. You look at Monday, it was plus 105, got up to plus 108, and then it ends up closing at minus 103. So a little bit of movement there in favor of Minnesota. It wasn't a true 15-cent line move, but the line did sort of move in favor of Minnesota. So maybe a loss, maybe a miss on my part. I'm not playing that. But again, I like those other two plays more so than Minnesota. So just to sort of recap, and before I close this video out, if you want access to these power rankings, you can do so. It's $49.95 per month. There's a link to join in the description box. You get access to, we do an NBA playoffs, NHL playoffs, as well as MLB. And in addition to that, you get all of my coaching videos. I probably have over 200 coaching videos on the site. If you want access to everything I just mentioned, in addition to all my personal plays, that's $99 per month. And the best value is joining for an entire year. It's basically like getting an associate's degree in sports betting. That's $4.99. You save about $600 off the entire year, and you get access to everything on the site for one full year for $500. So, just to sort of recap, I'm taking these power rankings. I'm looking for value, just like traditional value. Detroit minus 125. The actual books had them at plus 115. That's value. And then I'm also writing down if a team is a favorite via my line, favorite the books. And then I evaluate it. I want to look at form. I kind of did this one fast, even though this video is long. I look at form. I look at starting pitching. I look at line movement and see if we have situational angles that we can use in our favor. Then from that, I'm basically narrowing it down. Like here, just to kind of make it simple, I narrowed it down to 4, Atlanta, Detroit, Texas, San Diego. And then between those 4, I want to pick my 2 best plays. Now, the reason I do that is it takes the variance out. So if I have 2 plays, I know the worst thing that's going to happen is what? I'm going to go 0-2. And I like cherry picking it this way. The previous video, I talked about variance where you can play a lot of volume and play with the variance, meaning here in this case, if we'd have played all 4 of these plays, we would have went 3-1. Or you could have played it the way I did, Atlanta, San Diego, we went 2-0. So I like the low volume approach, and this is a good exercise because what this will do with your handicapping is it forces you, if you know you're only going to play 2 plays, it forces you to handicap, meaning you're looking at this Atlanta game, which is the better play, Atlanta or Texas? And it forces you to draw comparisons, and I think it will drastically improve your handicapping by just selecting, 2 plays each day to play. So anyway, if you got any questions, post them in the comment section. I'll try to answer those. And good luck handicapping Major League Baseball. Super excited about this model and where we could potentially end up having a really, really strong year in Major League Baseball. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.